Hey, what's going on? For those who don't know how this works, I usually take one of my hour-plus long videos and split it into segments based on class for those who may have been turned away due to the daunting runtime of the original video. This time, it is from my TF2 Biggest Weapon Glowups first unlocked video, which was nearly 2 hours long. To make it a bit more interesting, since I didn't go over stock weapons in that video, I will go over stock weapons that have changed for that class in each video, and they'll be placed at the end, so even if you've seen the original video, there will be something new for you. Because the original video was a ranking, I have slightly re-edited some parts, and now it works on a +5, -5 system, with 0 being neutral, +5 being a major transformation in a positive way, and -5 being a major transformation in a negative way. Soldier was last month, that means Pyro is up next. Depending on your playstyle, this one may be a weapon that people consider a Glowdown rather than Glowup, but I'll try my best to explain why I believe this is not the case. This one also has a bit of extra difficulty added on due to major changes in mechanics of this item over time. I'm sure that gave it away for some of you. It's the Backburner. The Backburner, in my opinion, is a quite underutilized flamethrower, but this is not a video going over my opinion on the weapon itself, but comparing it to its original version. If you know the Backburner history already, which there is a good chance, this is sort of one of those weapons that gets talked about a lot, especially its original version, you either immediately disagreed with me or you immediately agreed with me. The Backburner currently has 2 stats and 1 hidden stat. The ability to crit from behind, that is the main gimmick of the weapon. It's about a 73-degree window, give or take about 1 to 2 degrees. The hitbox is a little bit weird. And it comes at the downside of Air Blast costing 150% more, which is 50 instead of 20. And it also cannot randomly crit, which has been left off the weapon card since 2008. I don't know why it's not there. That is how it is today, but here's the hard part. The original Backburner was around during just a different time in the TF2 landscape. So things weren't exactly 1-to-1. Let's go over the stats first. It had 3 stats, and then it had, like I said, the no random crit stat that was, once again, left off the weapon card. It has never been on there for some reason, but the Backburner cannot randomly crit. The listed stats were, first, it crits from behind. That's the exact same. I think there's some slight differences, but overall it's pretty much the same. Though after that, everything else changes. The original Backburner, I'm sure you heard this before, also sported a 50 max health bonus, which increased Pyro's health to 225 at base, which allowed his overheal to go up to 335, and this came at the downside of no air blast rather than increased air blast cost, which is funny to me because air blast was introduced in the same update that the Backburner was added in the first place. Yes, I think I said it already, Pyro lacked air blast when the game first came out, but I'm sure most of you knew that already, even without me telling you. This is where things become extremely difficult. First, fire used to work very differently. If you played before Jungle Inferno, you probably know this already. Instead of Afterburn ranging from 4 to 10 seconds based on exposure, dealing 4 damage per tick, Afterburn always lasted 10 seconds, except for a short time where it lasted 6, and did 3 damage per tick. Flames also couldn't bounce off walls. They were a little bit more transparent, just a tad, and they were more of a fiery yellow, as well as damage ramp up being significantly worse. Not as bad as it was back in 2007, where I think it fell off to like 25% damage. It was stupid. Not that bad, but it was still a little bit worse than it is today. It's time for me to make a decision, and I'm a bit split on this one for a major reason. My answer would be different based on the era of the game. That's right. In the modern era, because Air Blast is so integral and players are generally better at the game, I mean the game's almost 18 years old, the modern Backburner, despite the air blast costs, would be more effective because you can still stuff Ubers, reflect the odd projectile, push people around, etc. However, I honestly think that had it been 2008 TF2, my answer would be different for multiple reasons. 50 extra health is a lot even today, but back then, due to the lower average skill of players, that was even bigger. Plus, Air Blast was new, so basically this flamethrower was the original flamethrower, but with 50 more health and the ability to crit from behind. It doesn't stop there either. The original Air Blast was far worse than it is today. Sure, it could lock people midair, and Air Blast would always predictably push people, but other than that, it wasn't very good. It costed 25 instead of 20, the delay between compression blasts was 25% longer, it didn't mini crit boost projectiles, it could occasionally push friendly demo man grenades, It couldn't extinguish teammates when it first came out. There was just a lot of little things where it wasn't as good. So if we're comparing the weapons back then, like if we took the current Backburner and compared it to the original Backburner back in 2008, the original one would probably win. But because we're looking at it in a modern sense, if you were to take the 2008 version and bring it to 2025 or beyond, I think the Backburner has overall had a bit of a glow up, especially when factoring in new mechanics and the average skill of current players. The current flare gun is a simple weapon. The flare gun has 16 flares to work with, fires projectile at 2,000 hammer units that will deal 30 damage on the initial hit, and will ignite enemies for 7.5 seconds, dealing 4 damage per tick, so about 8 damage per second or so. The weapon guarantees a critical if you hit an enemy who has already been ignited, regardless of the source. The flare gun also has the ability to reload while holstered. Learned that not too long ago. Thought that was a Crusader's crossbow exclusive, but it seems that is not the case. The modern flare gun, despite being so old, is a certified hood classic and is a go-to combo tool, seeing as the reserve shooter is no longer piss easy to use. That was a fun time in history, for sure. The flare gun is great for pestering enemies at long distances, comboing, and is a good range tool for a class that is handicapped due to its range. This is how the weapon has always been supposed to function, but it wasn't always so good at its job. I wouldn't say it was ineffective. It certainly was good at doing what it was supposed to, however, it was a bit weaker than it is today. First, let's talk about the neutral changes that I would consider a slight downside, but technically weird stuff. In 2017, all flare guns' afterburn duration was reduced by 2.5 seconds from 10 to 7.5, but the afterburn damage was increased from 3 to 4 per tick, so 8 per second instead of 6. Now that we got that out of the way, and not very long, we could discuss the actual differences of the flare gun itself. First, the flare gun didn't do as much damage originally. Instead of 30 damage on hit like it does today, it only did 20 on a direct hit. To make it worse, and I think this is the biggest sin of all, it didn't do any increased damage versus burning enemies. No, it didn't crit, nor did it mini crit. It would eventually get the stat to mini crit versus burning enemies a bit later on, and then that would be changed to mini crit up close while critting at mid to long range. And then that would be changed to critting at all ranges, but the 2008 version of the flare gun could not crit at all, so hitting somebody who was on fire would just do 20 damage. Similar to how the original loose cannon was, where it could double donk without actually having a double donk effect. The flare guns could still be a solid 1-2 punch type weapon, but it was just 20 damage. That's all. No crit, nothing special. The flare gun is a great weapon nowadays, and still was solid for its time. Like I said, this is 2008, it's a little bit different of a time, but it would likely not have as much love today if it hadn't been touched whatsoever. This weapon here has been every kind of useful and useless. It has been absolutely busted, really good, legit ass, and decent. It's been over more hurdles than a track star in his late 30s. The weapon I'm here to discuss for being quite a glowdown is the Axtinguisher for Pyro. This axe, like I said, has gone through a lot over the years, and despite being one of the oldest unlocks in the game, releasing all the way back on June 19, 2008, older than 25% of TF2's player base, the current state of the weapon is fine, it works, but it can be a bit underwhelming, and while you're not throwing by using this weapon, you aren't running the power jack, therefore you're committing a sin against humanity. The current Axtinguisher, in my opinion, is just weird. The design is not super straightforward because the main upside of the weapon is that it mini crits burning enemies, which seems pretty straightforward for sure, but it's the second stat right here that kind of throws the consistency right out the window. You see, the damage scales based on the remaining time of afterburn. The lower the afterburn timer, the less damage it does. The longer the afterburn timer, the more damage it does, which I guess somewhat makes sense because of a stat we'll get to in a minute, but regardless of it making sense overall, it's still a bit weird and it's a bit hard to tell how much damage you're going to do unless you got the stopwatch on you. It ranges from 86 at the very lowest to 167 at the very highest, with a base damage of 44 against enemies who are not on fire, 43 against buildings. The final upside is the fact that you get a speed boost on the killing blow if the enemy was currently on fire. For the downside, you have a damage penalty I alluded to, being 33%. No random critical hits because it's a weapon with on-demand crits, sort of, and a 35% holster speed penalty. Finally, while not a listed downside, it sorta is, hitting a player with the axe will do heavy damage and then extinguish them. Axtinguisher, get it? This is what I meant by the damage scaling technically making sense. It does less damage the less time the afterburn timer has because they took significant damage from the afterburn already, but if you hit them while the timer still has significant time, it will deal more damage as they haven't taken much damage from the afterburn itself. It makes sense, but it's not straightforward because you're not going to always know exactly how much time they have. It's not like it used to be where it was always 10 seconds of afterburn, now it's 4 to 10, so you're not always sure. It's just a little bit weird. Anyway, the current Axtinguisher, while not the power jack, therefore bad, is a solid weapon on its own and can be good if you like the more old school puff and sting style of pyro gameplay. The OG axe had just 3 stats. It used to crit versus burning enemies, for the downside of 50% less damage versus non-burning players. Do you see the problem? That little bit at the end, 50% damage against non-burning players. Sure, you only did 33 damage to those who were not on fire for some reason. Maybe if you got caught with your dick in your hand or something, but believe it or not, lighting people on fire with the flamethrower that you hardly have to aim, this weapon would lose the damage penalty and full crit enemies on fire. And it didn't have the extinguish stat it does now. So you could continue to bludgeon these enemies to death with a barbed wire covered axe for 195 damage a pop. I guess there was the other downside of no random crits versus non-burning enemies. Yes, it was worded that way, but I mean, who needs random crits when a single flame particle, which used to last 10 full seconds by the way, afterburn used to last a full 10 seconds regardless of how much damage or how much time they spent engulfed in flames, was enough to supercharge your melee weapon. Sure, this was 2008, and players were not as good as they are today, and Air Blast was a new mechanic that most didn't yet understand. Regardless, the Axtinguisher was really good and would be busted to high hell in today's game. I mean, imagine pyros with current skill pyros here in 2025 and beyond, using that version of the Axtinguisher. All hell would break loose. While the current one ain't bad, it's just a monumental glowdown. Our Pyromaniac, just like Scout and Soldier, has only had one weapon that changed somewhat significantly. Actually, very significantly. This weapon has gone through a ton of changes. We already briefly touched on the shotgun last time, and there's nothing of interest for Pyro, so that means we're going to look at the Flamethrower, the weapon that in 1996 allowed people with crappy internet to still play the game and do something before Engineer was inevitably added to the game. Legit meant to run in, do some damage, light him on fire, and die. Now Pyro is a lot more than that, but it's still the bread and butter of Pyro. The Flamethrower is a goddamn flustercock of a weapon to wrap your head around completely. I mean, the design principles are rather easy to understand. It's a flamethrower, it lights people on fire, it shoots flames. But it's the minor details which we have to go over because there's a lot of things that have changed that just get a little bit complicated. First, the flamethrower's damage is a bit wonky compared to a lot of other weapons. It fires just over 30, around 33 invisible particles capable of bouncing off surfaces like floors and walls, and costing 12.5 ammo per second. The max damage is 13 per 0.075 seconds, which allows you to do a max of somewhere between 169 and 182 damage per second if your flames are fully ramped up. Which, there are 2 forms of ramp up. The first form of ramp up is range, however it's not based on distance per se, but rather the amount of time the flame particle has been alive. Basically all this means is that if you have some sort of momentum going in a certain direction, or you're doing the cone trick on, I believe it's Badwater, this can allow you to do significant damage beyond what you could do if you were standing completely still. If you are moving or falling or something, you technically get a little bit more range. If the particle is just about to disappear but it clips the enemy bounding box, it just does 50% damage. It also has a damage ramp up similar to the minigun, but instead it is localized to one person at a time. 0.9 seconds of firing to go from 50% to max damage on an enemy. An enemy will take more damage the longer they are engulfed in flames. But this does not apply to buildings, they take full damage regardless. Afterburn scales based on time they are on fire, starting at just 4 seconds if they're barely touched with one particle, and up to 10 seconds if they spent significant time in Pyro's barrage of flames. While on fire with the stock flamethrower, they'll take 4 damage per half second or so, allowing for a max of 80 damage, assuming they're on fire for the full 10 seconds, because you were allowing them to cook long enough, and they weren't extinguished via the resupply cabinet, Girardi, Sydney Sleeper when it decides to actually not be a pain in the ass and work, water, gas for some reason, mad milk, all those. Fire will also reduce the effectiveness of healing sources such as dispensers and mediguns, and technically the amputator as well. The exact numbers are weird. I believe it was intended to be a 20% reduction, but it's not that simple. Level 1 dispensers healing, for example, are completely canceled out by fire, not allowing them to heal much at all. But level 2 and level 3 will heal you a little bit, I believe, but at a much slower pace. Backstanger bubbles effectiveness are reduced by 20%. Despite this, mediguns will still reduce the duration of afterburn, assuming they got a direct medigun beam on you. And that's just the primary fire. We have the secondary fire. You can press mouse 2 to perform a compression blast, or what is often referred to as an air blast. Air blast, as of 2017, is in the shape of a cone, costing 20 ammo, and can be performed every 3/4 of a second. It can push enemies, which is based on the direction you are aiming and which direction they are moving. It does temporarily stop their momentum, giving you a small window to attack with more control. Air blast can also reflect projectiles, turning them into Pyro's team color, and mini-crit boosting them with the exception of sticky bombs, which are just pushed around. It also restores the explosion radius of any explosives with a penalty, like the direct hit rockets, which will now have the full explosion radius of the rocket launcher. And the compression blast can also extinguish teammates, which will return 20 health to the Pyro. Oh my god. The flamethrower is legitimately just a mess. It is an amalgamation of a million different stats. A very controlled mess, but a mess nonetheless. I'm sure for the majority of you, there was something you didn't know. Hell, there was a lot I didn't know before researching. And a lot of it is fuzzy as hell because there's so many intricacies, it's impossible to know the exact specifics of the weapon. And I'm no data miner, I can't tell you the exacts. But how does it compare to the flamethrower in 2007? That I can tell you. Well, it does pretty well. The original flamethrower was not nearly as good as it is today. Visually, the only thing that has changed is the fire particles being more of a fiery orange rather than yellow, which personally I prefer. But a lot of systems work the same, but with different numbers. To my understanding, there were fewer particles per second, but this could be a community testing error, or it could be a legit change. Not 100% sure. Though something a little bit more concrete, Afterburn used to always last 10 seconds regardless of time on fire, but it only did 3 damage per tick instead of 4, which meant it could do a max of 60, assuming they didn't get healed or whatever. Something I must discuss for the sake of completion is it also had less predictable flame particles. If you remember the Jungle Inferno update, and remember why so many people picked Pyro instead of Heavy to get an update, you know that Pyro was even more of a buggy mess than he is now. Flame particles could be affected by ping, making it pretty unpredictable. The range was just, sometimes it was really far, sometimes it wasn't, and it didn't really match the visuals of the flame. Even not taking that into account, rather than falling off 50% damage like it does today, it would fall off to 25% damage. Direct flames nor afterburn affected healing sources like they do now, and worst of all, flamethrowers lacked air blast altogether. That wouldn't be introduced until the Pyro update of 2008, and like I discussed in the Backburner section, it was significantly worse than it is now. The only thing that I left out was that it originally had a square hitbox, so there was times where it could be like on the side of you, or a projectile could be to your right or to your left, and you could still reflect it, whereas you can't do that now. But even so, it was significantly worse. There were a bunch of little changes made to the flamethrower as well, such as it being less responsive to retreating enemies, but what I told you is the gist of it. That is a ton to take in all at once, I know, and I'm sorry. The flamethrower is a convoluted as hell weapon. The takeaway is be glad that we live in 2025 and beyond, because the flamethrower in 2007 was not very good. A world without air blast, worse hit detection, reduced damage, and compression blast spam would be a world run by soldiers and demoman, which sounds like TF2 nowadays anyway, but it would be significantly worse. The flamethrower has had a glow up, that is what I'm getting at. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this month's segment. Next month will be Demoman. So, hope you stick around. I'll see you later.